I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which this podcast is recorded, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror with Jessicka Anne.
Welcome to Dark Mirror. It is me, your host, Jessicka Anne, and today I want to talk to you about a pattern that I see affecting coaches and entrepreneurs at multiple stages on their business journey, whether or not it is that startup phase or right through to when they're making multi-7, 8 figures. This pattern can be recurring, and to me, it is a central aspect of how any relationship in our lives operates. And one of the misconceptions to really clear up straight away is that we are in relationship with our business, whether or not it is as a solopreneur relationship, which is often where people experience a kind of enmeshment with their business, as in it is me and I am it. Or even if you are in a leadership capacity, you are still in relationship with the entity of your business, the team inside it. And the complexities of that relationship are really going to influence how and why and when you're making decisions, and either be the bottleneck or the thing that actually opens up possibility for you to do more of what it is that you're here to do. So the term I'm going to use, you might have different language for it. However, for me, it has been a really helpful way to conceptualize both these patterns, but also the energetic structure that's existing underneath it. And so what I see creating a lot of suffering for business owners is the illusion of the perpetual summer, that there is this point of arrival where everything is systemized, strategized, streamlined, maybe our energy is attuned enough, whatever version of reality you're currently existing inside. But there is this point of arrival where suddenly everything is the land of plenty, that there is always enough clients, that there are always enough opportunities, that we're just spending time doing all of the things that feel like we're basking in the sun. So knowing that that's kind of the metaphor I'm going to be using, it explains why I'll be referring to this as the seasons inside business. So this eternal summer that we idolize often becomes weaponized as an unrealistic yardstick for us to measure our progress against. This is why people often get stuck inside this illusion of feeling that they should be further ahead, is because they believe in this idea of the eternal summer. But if we look at nature and the natural laws of things, there is nothing that exists in this state. There is nothing that continues to propagate without its own eventual collapse. Coming back to the Hermetic axioms, all that rise must fall. The degree of swing to the left is the degree of swing to the right. There is a natural rhythm inside everything. And to resist that is really to just drive yourself mad. So upon first encountering this idea, I'll be honest, it kind of scared me. It made me believe that for every success that I created, there would be an inevitable downfall. And at its extreme, it may show up that way. However, and this is often how I talk about astrology as well with my clients, is that we don't want to be at effect of a pattern when we also have the opportunity to channel a pattern. So this is where this language of seasons and working with the seasons starts to get interesting. How can we start to develop a relationship with this? How can we start to work with this energy more intentionally so that we're no longer at effect of it? Does that mean that we're going to be in complete and absolute control of every single eventuality? Of course not. However, what we can do is we can start to smooth out some of the obvious things that are controllable. If so many of us are positively polarized in this idea of the eternal summer, naturally that also invokes in us a fear of the winter. And so what is a winter in a business or in our work? A winter is a point where things grow still. It's a point where energy starts to move inward. It is a point when in nature, the leaves start to fall off the trees, that which is ready to die off dies off, and there's a moment of pause. It's funny, what actually really prompted me to talk about this today is that I was tuning into the energy of what I wanted to share, and the card that I pulled was the Hangman. And so if you're familiar with the tarot, the Hanged Man is the point in the soul's evolution where something is given up in order for something else to come through. It's also that moment of pause. And so the winter is the point where we allow ourselves to go inward. Now, in a business context, a lot of people equate this with the season where we stop earning money, where people stop showing up, where we want to burn the whole thing down. And if you have an unintegrated relationship with the winter, that is definitely how these things can show up. We overgive, perpetuating this illusion of the eternal summer. And then naturally the pendulum wants to swing back to correct itself. And so what are we really resisting inside the winter? And depending on the stage you're in and who you are, this can take many flavors. Often it's the fear of failure. When things become still, it means that things will collapse. If that's the primary thought that you're having, it actually identifies an insecurity you have inside the business itself, but also inside you. Do you have the wherewithal to stand in full conviction that regardless of what comes up, you will continue to show up? Do you have the wherewithal and the conviction inside you to know that you'll continue to find the way forward? Now, I'm mindful at this point that for some people that are running a very conventional, linear business model, this might not apply. What I'm really talking about here is your soul's work. If you know your business is here to be in service of your soul's growth and the expression of that out into the world, naturally the work that we do does take on this quality, this idea that we are here to find the path of its expression and to be in service to that. So that insecurity of it all falling apart is really where you are unable to rest back into that conviction inside you of being able to find the way. We're still existing in the eventualities of what would it mean if it fell apart and then I needed to do X, Y, and Z, rather than the trust, but also questioning the shapes that we're assuming something needs to take. I remember several years ago, I was about to launch a mastermind container because at the time my mentor had recommended that as the next logical step in my business. And I kept trying to push my energy in that direction, but everything in me kept shutting down. And it felt like this battle of wills around what I could see made sense and also where my energy was taking me. And so I went deep into a winter because I had become married to the version that I felt this thing should take, rather than actually listening to where it wanted to go. And so in hindsight, what would have been a more valuable question for me to ask of my mentor is, what functions is this shape taking inside my business and how else could I meet that brief? And then taking that back in, assimilating it and coming up with something different. But like I said, that inability to lean into trust, coupled with this idea of something needs to take a specific shape, is often where this insecurity comes from. Another part that often has people resisting the winter is that sometimes in the stillness, they realize the direction they've been going in isn't the direction that is calling them anymore. There is an evolution inside them that is wanting to happen. And so sometimes we avoid the winter because it means a reckoning with a version of us that is ready to die, a version of us that is no longer serving. And so the fear inherent inside that is actually an inability to trust who we're becoming. And so we either stay busy or we collapse into a kind of inaction that is not even really a winter, it's more of a freeze. And so this resistance of letting go of these past versions of us, it's really looking at who we are afraid of losing or what. What happens when we actually let this version of us go and open ourselves to who we're here to become next? Because the alternative is that we keep trying to resurrect the corpse of the past version of us. And as we know, dead weight eventually gets heavy. And so carrying forward with that performance leads to its own kind of exhaustion. So it's really the opportunity to choose it now rather than later by moving into the winter. And while these things are often patterns that come along with the winter and it's part of why we resist, not every winter needs to be so intense. Naturally, like I said before, a winter is a point of review, a point where we look at what is ready to be let go. And sometimes this is also where we get to review our boundaries. Where have I been over-delivering? Where have I been over-giving? Alternatively, our standards. Where have I been doing things that aren't serving where I want to be or how the level I want to be playing at? And so the winter is this really beautiful opportunity to review. The winter is also a time for us to look at the structures and the shapes that things are wanting to take. Looking at our back end, reviewing how we can refine that, and also the things inside us that need nurturing for where we're going next. So think of those opportunities to do your own inner work, to grow, to educate yourself, whatever that may be. One of the things that I often see trips people up is that they'll be in that spring summer phase where they're bringing things into visibility and then deciding that they need to change gears to work on the structures in the back end. And while that's not necessarily wrong, if you are operating with a small team, that can be a thing that completely derails your summer. And so making it an intentional, productive winter to refine the things that need to happen moving forward is really essential. Now, some of you might be listening to this saying, wow, a productive winter sounds great, but I really need to be at the front end of my business earning money. If that's the problem that's tripping you up, you've actually got a different problem. It's related to the seasons, but its architecture is a bit different. The problem of not being able to take a winter is really about your relationship with your time horizon. If you are needing to show up month on month at the front end of your business, constantly promoting things, you are on the launch hamster wheel. Ideally, a business becomes more sustainable, more ecological when we have developed a capacity for money to flow without all of the front end drive. This now allows for a natural ebb and flow of your energy to be brought into the front end. Because there will absolutely be times where your energy is more at the front. And even in those natural ebbs, of course, there will still be sales and things happening, but it will be less of your energy at the front driving it. And it also gives you an opportunity to recover, to integrate the journey of what's just been, because we all know that business is just as much a spiritual journey as it is a material one. To integrate this version of you that has just completed this cycle, ready for what's coming next. What's really important in maturing this relationship to the seasons is to realize the inherent role that each part of this cycle plays. If we take this out of the business space directly into nature for a moment, if you think about the cycle of if we don't plant the seeds, we don't water the seeds, then the seeds won't grow. And if the seeds don't grow, then there's no fruit. And if there's no fruit, there's nothing to harvest. And there's nothing to harvest, then we get stuck in the winter. And so this cycle of recognizing which phase your business is inside is really integral for you to remove a lot of the headaches inside each of these seasons. Another map that I feel that this maps across to quite well is actually a model for helping teams move through transition, but our business goes through the exact same phases. We've got the forming, the storming, the norming, performing, and adjourning. And so that forming phase really happens in the winter. Everything that we create comes from space. So if we're not taking the space, if we're resisting that natural ebb, where does the new come from? And so what is formed happens in the winter. The storm is where we start to come out of that winter into the spring. We're starting to actually allow things to be propagated. We're starting to work through the friction of cracking through the soil. Then we go to the norming phase, which is really a combination of the late spring into the summer, which is where we are being visible, where the fruits are being grown. And then we go into the performing phase, which is straight summer, into the autumn, because we start to actually reap the benefits of all of the things that we've built. And then lastly, that last phase, the adjourning, is when we're back in the winter, realizing what is ready to be let go, what inside this system is ready to die. And so the more that we can make it about what's best for the business, the less it's about who we are. That ability to take a step back, to ask the questions around what needs to happen for this next phase of growth. And each friction point we come up against is unique. Sometimes it is postponing this launch because there are things that need to be streamlined before we can actually fully go in again. Sometimes it is letting the back end be messy in order that we storm, that we rush to the front. Sometimes it is things going more slowly because we're training people to take these things off our hands. Each of these has a season, and each of them are integral for a business to run in the way that it is most sustainable. So the irony is that so often the word that I hear when people are stuck inside this pattern is the desire for consistency. And yet they're not seeing that consistency isn't a fixed state. It's a system. It's a cycle. And so the more that we continue to reject that cycle, trying to stay in the summer, the more inconsistent something will be because we're not letting it go through its natural ebbs and flows. So practically, what I'd invite you to do from here is to call your promised land into question. What is it that I am telling myself needs to happen so that I feel like I can finally take my foot off the brake? Is what I'm focusing on right now appropriate for the season that I am in? If I have been unable to take a winter, what systems or team needs to be put in place to make that possible? Because otherwise you're on the fast track to burnout. You don't have a business. You have created yourself a job. And if you want some tools to start to move through some of the inner work around how you're relating to this, I'm going to share my mirror prompts down below. There are 11 targeted shadow work questions that you can work through in your own time just to start to excavate some of the ways you're thinking about this and actually move through it so you can get back into flow. I'd love to know what was valuable from this episode. Feel free to comment or leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this. Otherwise, please shoot me an Instagram DM. My details are down in the show notes. We will be back next week with my incredible episode with Travis Cochran, aka The Technician.